Friday, December 4th edition of the Clemson Dubcast. Hope everybody out there has had a great week. Tigers set to face Virginia Tech tomorrow night. And on the recruiting trail, really interesting developments with Corey Foreman as the world turns with that kid. Paul Strelo does a great job of staying on top of that for our subscribers at TigerIllustrated.com. Title sponsor of the Dubcast since the very beginning, back in August of 2018, Parham Smith & Archenhold Law Firm in downtown Greenville. They want you to know that their office remains open and available to serve you during the COVID-19 crisis. They are also offering their clients the ability to meet via telephone or through video conferencing. Whether you have a loved one who has suffered from a car accident, defective product, a neglectful nursing home facility, or medical malpractice issue, Parham Smith & Archenhold's Greenville lawyers can provide the protection and guidance you need. Free consultations, 864-990-4581, or on the web at parhamlaw.com. That's P-A-R-H-A-M law.com. Football season is grilling season, and Jack Oliver's Pool, Spa, and Patio is South Carolina's premier source for the big three names in grills: Weber, Traeger, and my favorite, the Big Green Egg. Make the most of your stay-at-home tailgate party with a premium gas, charcoal, or pellet grill from Jack Oliver's. Their 10,000 square foot showroom offers a huge selection of grills, patio furniture, and hot tubs and saunas. Shop in the store or buy online at Jack Oliver's Pool, Spa, and Patio, 3303 Forest Drive in Columbia, and jackoliverpools.com. If you're in the Eastern Midlands and PD area and you're in any way interested in buying and selling a home, commercial property, land, need to consider reaching out to Uptown Realty. They're based out of Sumter and run by a friend of mine, Patrick Enzer, big Clemson guy, used to cover the Tigers in a newspaper capacity, longtime supporter of Tiger Illustrated, longtime listener to the Dubcast. The home buying process should be an enjoyable experience, so let Patrick and his staff do all the heavy lifting. All you got to do is pick up the phone and call 803-774-0435 or go to uptownrealtysc.com. Okay, to our interviews, and yes, we kept the music going on purpose. Fabulous bumper music from the band The City Champs out of Memphis. They got a new album coming up, I think, in March, I believe, so stay tuned for that. All right, here we go. We're going to start off with Matt Connolly of the State Newspaper. All right, joined by Matt Connolly. Matt, can you confirm that you're back from Tallahassee?
I am. Thank God I'm back. Yeah, that was not a fun weekend at all.
I talked to you before you left to go down there. And then when the game is canceled, I'm thinking, I mean, that's a hellacious trip when there is a game. Like, even when it's a great, a great matchup type of game. Wow. What a drag.
Yeah, it's a lot of back roads depending on the way you go, which is the way I went. So it's a lot of back roads, and you're going through the middle of nowhere in Georgia, and nothing to really look at except for trees, and it was not a fun trip. So yeah, I basically got there in time to watch the Purdue game Friday night, watched them lose, went to bed, woke up, and was getting on the elevator, getting ready to head to the stadium when my phone went off. So it was interesting for sure.
How did you hear the news? Like, was it your boss, or was it Ross Taylor, somebody at Clemson, or?
No, so I just had ACC tweet notifications turned on, and so as soon as they tweeted it, I was like, "What in the world?" Is it postponed for a few hours? Is it postponed for weeks? What's exactly going on? I thought maybe something was going on at the stadium or something, and maybe it would be postponed until later that night. But yeah, so then I started just trying to figure out what I could do to make it worthwhile for me making the trip, and thankfully I was able to find the team hotel and track down Dan Radakovich and talk to him a little bit. So it wasn't a complete waste from being there, but definitely not what I planned when I made the trip down.
Yeah, that's good hustle on your part to get over there to get Radakovich. Was that the first in-person interview you've had in a long time?
Yeah, I didn't even think about it at the time, but it definitely was. Yeah, I don't know. It's just been so weird. I mean, I've seen Dan and talked to him in the press box and stuff like that. But yeah, as far as like an actual interview or anything like that, yeah, I didn't even think about that. But yeah, it definitely was. At least for Clemson. I'm trying to think if I've done any recruiting or anything in person. But yeah, I think that was probably the first one I've done in a long time.
I thought, and you tweeted a little video of of the team leaving for the airport, and I thought that was really telling, and provided some context to the story, because as Clemson, I mean, even that morning they're getting just hammered, for, I guess, being irresponsible or whatever, bringing there's a lot of speculation at that point,
right?
But a lot of people are sort of parroting the narrative that, oh my God, they traveled with a sick, symptomatic player and this and that, and it's like, you count those buses, it's like 1, 2, 9 buses for 80 players is just crazy. Like, I thought that said a lot about, their commitment to taking this dang thing seriously.
Right. Yeah. And I think that was a main point of frustration for Clemson. And I also, I drove around to the back of the hotel. I was actually parked in an abandoned restaurant next door to the hotel, and kind of could see back there where the buses and everything were too. And I also saw the huge circus tent that, as Dabo described it, and it was a huge tent that they were holding meetings in and meals in and everything else, so that everyone could be spread out and 6 feet apart. So they rented out this huge tent and took up the entire hotel parking lot. I think that they had rented out the whole hotel. I'm pretty sure. Maybe didn't rent it out, but just the way it worked out as far as rooms and everything. I think that Clemson was only people staying there. Clemson's football team was really all that was there. So they did all these measures, extra buses, do all this stuff, the masks and face shields and all that kind of stuff, so that if a situation like Friday does happen, then you can still play the game. So I think that was a lot of the frustration, is like, what in the world are we doing all this for if we're going to have a positive test, which Dabo said, we all knew was possible going into the season, and then the game's going to be canceled anyway. So I definitely understood Clemson's frustration, and probably understood it even more after kind of seeing everything up close.
I don't, of course, everything went nuclear after that Sunday night teleconference that Dabo had. And I'm not saying he handled it perfectly. Obviously, when you say, that's not, COVID's not why they canceled that game. They just used that as an excuse. They didn't want to, basically saying they didn't want to get 70 hung on them. Maybe a little strong there.
Right.
And then the other thing he said, I think it was maybe the next night on his coach's show, he said that Pitt had the same thing happen, which actually they didn't. They had a player who didn't make the trip who had tested positive. So I think he misspoke on that. But to the key points that he made on that teleconference that night, and he had like 7 or 8 of them, I couldn't disagree with any of them. Actually he made some points that I hadn't yet considered, mainly the one about this is why we increased the travel roster size.
Right.
And I think you're in the same boat in that, sort of dumbfounded as to why he was getting just hammered continually through that week. People are like, oh gosh, Dabo again. Why didn't he just stop it? He just needs to cut it out, like as if he's the one who's putting out press releases or something on it, and he's not being actually asked about it and just answering the questions. What's your takeaway now with some distance from that whole circus?
Yeah, I think it's kind of what you said, is that and I wrote about this too, is it seemed like the only thing people paid attention to was Dabo's comment just about COVID was an excuse or whatever. And so, everything else he said, all of the other points he made, no one really listened to. And so, with us being on the teleconference, with us hearing everything he said, with us, knowing Dabo and kind of knowing, I guess, how he talks and everything, I think that we could interpret everything and look at it from a big picture perspective, whereas a lot of people just only listen to the stuff that or the one quote, I guess, that was making headlines everywhere. So, I agree with you. I thought it was unfortunate that a lot of the points that he did make just got overlooked, and a lot of it, and he definitely had some points he wanted to make. And the point about Pitt, I think that was something that he wanted to make, even though it ended up being incorrect. But a lot of it throughout the rest of the week was people were asking him questions, and he's on the press conference and just answering questions that are asked of him. And so, people may not love the way he answered things, but at the same time, he just answered a question. He didn't mention it, and that was one thing I noted, is he didn't mention it at all in his opening statement for the Pitt press conference. And we know that those opening statements typically go a pretty long while, and that he usually covers everything he wants to in those. So he didn't mention it at all in his opening statement, which was several minutes. And so after that, when it did get brought up, it was only brought up after he was asked about it. So, yeah, I agree with you all around.
I mean, part of the problem here, right, is a lot of media folks nationally aren't participating in these press conferences. They're sitting on Twitter, and so they see a quote and they react to that, right away without really knowing the full context or knowing, okay, actually he was just asked about it. And that's becoming a really fundamental problem in my mind from the media side of it, is you just have more and more of these folks who, not all of them, I'm certainly not saying that, but they sit on Twitter for 15 hours a day and they don't have time to flip open another tab and it's not like they have to be there in person anymore. All these press conferences are accessible on Zoom now.
Right. And with it being 2020, and everything that's going on, that's something that we can do is, you can just hop on a teleconference very easily and ask whatever you want to, talk with Dabo. I mean, he'll answer whatever is asked of him. He doesn't shy away from questions, even though sometimes maybe he should in some instances. But, yeah, I mean, if you have a problem with it, go on there and ask him about it. It's kind of my opinion. So, yeah, I'm with you.
I think that, shouldn't he have had some money in the bank from, as far as the COVID stuff goes, some benefit of the doubt from how that he and they handled the Trevor Lawrence situation, holding him for the second game at Notre Dame?
For sure, and that was something we had talked about. Is like people were making, I don't want to say making excuses, but people were coming up with reasons, why it would be okay for Trevor to play. I mean, that was something a lot of national people were mentioning is, if you look at it like this, and if you count it from this day and that day and blah, 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 he can play. And I don't think Clemson would have been destroyed if he would have played against Notre Dame. I think there was a lot of speculation out there, and some people probably even assumed that he would play against Notre Dame when the news first broke. So, I think that they proved in that situation, and Dabo, I thought, handled it very, very well, is that, we're not going to change the rules for someone. It doesn't matter if it's Trevor Lawrence or a third string center or whatever it is. We're not going to change the rules, and we're going to follow our protocols and our rules that we have set. And if that means that Trevor Lawrence can't play against the best team in the country because he's out of isolation, and he still traveled for the game. He was cleared in everything other than kind of the cardio stuff that they had to do. So if he's cleared in every way other than the heart stuff, and Clemson still didn't play him and didn't rush him through anything, you would think that would show kind of that Clemson's taking this seriously and handling things well and doing the things they need to do.
What do you make of this team right now? Is it are they fit to win another national title, or is it still kind of developing? It kind of feels to me like we still don't really know, just because of so many areas where they're still kind of growing up.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, my big question mark all year has been the offensive line, and I don't know. It's just, I think they're averaging 149 yards rushing a game or something like that, and we've just been so accustomed the last few years to Clemson rushing for 200 plus yards a game and being able to get a ton of work done on the ground, and so. I think it's been a situation where it's been good at times. The pass blocking's been pretty good at times, but at other times, they haven't been able to run the ball great. And will that end up costing them a national title, or does the fact that you have Trevor Lawrence at quarterback and are throwing it all around? I think he's had 400 yards or more in 2 of his last 3 starts, and DJ threw for 400 plus on one of his starts. I mean, they're getting it done just fine. They're doing it a little differently this year. So I don't know if that will cost them at all. The fact that they can't really rely, I don't think that they trust right now. If they need to go do an 8-minute drive to end the game and do a lot of it on the ground, I don't know that they can do that. But I also don't know that that's necessarily going to cost them a national title when you have Trevor Lawrence at quarterback and receivers like Cornell and Amari stepping up the way they have been.
Two kind of key points of context, I think, that maybe the casual person doesn't really recognize when we look back to the running struggles against Boston College. I think they ran for 104, 105 yards in that game, and then, of course, 34 against Notre Dame, which was the lowest total since 2011. That offensive line, the starting five had played almost every snap for a 6-game stretch. So basically, it was 8 games for them because it was it was an extra 2 games compared to what the starting line last year at the same point had played. And then on top of that, DJ Uiagalelei, he was not a running threat because of his shoulder. So they picked their spots and stayed away from that as much as they could. Whereas, and Tony Elliott made the point earlier this week, when you have that running threat, that's an extra number in the Reed game. And so I think Trevor being there helps the running game just by his presence alone. And then the line looked a lot fresher against Pitt, a lot more forceful, at least early on. So I don't know. It seems like what we just said a minute ago, it's a developing story, sort of.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a situation where they can't run the ball. I just think we've seen some games where they haven't done it, I guess, as well as I would think so. I think they haven't necessarily developed some of the backups the way they have in typical years with the offensive line, just because there have been some close games too, maybe that they maybe a little more than normal. At least some games that have gone into the second half that have been competitive. Obviously not necessarily recently, but other than that, or obviously not necessarily most recently with the Pitt game, but Notre Dame, Boston College, even Syracuse was a little close, and so I feel like they couldn't really develop some of those guys. But like I said, we'll see if that matters and how much of a running threat they can be going forward, and if they can get it going against Virginia Tech this weekend.
With this defense, that at a certain point, they're going to be back to vintage 16, 17, 18 form. And my only question is it going to be later this year or is it going to be next year? Because you've got so many guys that are getting experience. 23 guys have started a game on the defensive side of the ball through so far. That's incredible. That many. Obviously that's been born of injuries and other stuff, but that's going to pay off at some point when it's all going to come together, I would imagine. I don't know whether it's going to be this year or next year.
Yeah, I thought last Saturday's performance against Pitt was maybe the best of the year defensively. Just when you look at the fact that you're missing your top 2 cover corners and Sheridan and DK. You got some other injuries in the secondary. Obviously, you had Tyler Davis and Skowski back, but still, Pitt had been throwing the ball pretty much all over everyone. I know they passed for over 400 against Virginia Tech. Pickett was having a really good year. Addison at receiver was really good. And so, I thought without Clemson's top 2 cover corners that they would at least be able to move the ball some through the air, and they just came out and completely shut them down. Andrew Booth had a great game. Mario Goodrich had a great game, obviously, with a couple picks. So I was really impressed with the secondary and what they did. DK is a guy who's projected by some places as a first-round pick, and to do that without him, without Sheridan, who's been really good this year, I thought was really impressive. 3 interceptions in the first quarter. They just really swallowed up Pitt from the start, and the game was really never competitive.
Yeah, well, part of the story was Davis and Skowski coming back. That wasn't the whole story because you had 4 new starters in that game.
Right.
Starting for the first time.
Yeah, it was crazy, and we really haven't gotten to see what a completely healthy full defense for Clemson looks like this year. in the game. I mean, it's just been pretty much every week there's been someone else, and that's not even mentioning Justin Foster, who's maybe the best defensive end on the team, who hasn't played all year, and it doesn't sound like he's necessarily coming back anytime soon, if at all, this year. So to do all this without him, without Logan Rudolph, without Xavier Thomas for a lot of the year, without Tyler Davis for a lot of the year, obviously Skowski. It's been a great coaching job by Brent Venables.
What do you think that Virginia Tech's basically in the tank? That they're opted out, so to speak, mentally, and that this is going to be just a walk in the park tomorrow night?
It's interesting in that I think the spread, and I know it's 22 points is a pretty good bit of points, but it's not as high necessarily as I thought when you look at the way Virginia Tech played in this last game, and kind of, I think, a sense a lot of people have that they're just kind of done with the season. So, I don't know. I mean, I think it'll tell us a lot about Fuente and where things stay with him when you're coming off a bye week and got destroyed in your last game, to see if guys are going to come out and fight and try to put up a fight and try to keep it competitive into the second half, or if they're just going to have quit, for lack of a better word, and then just roll over and kind of let Clemson do whatever it wants to. So I'm really interested to see, not only just from Clemson's perspective, but also from Virginia Tech, how they respond and if they show up and put any kind of fight up.
My hunch is they do, partly because of what you said. You've had 2 weeks to hear about and think about what happened against Pitt. And then you've got arguably the best program in the country coming to your house this week. And then next week you've got your in-state rival that ended a 15-game Tech winning streak in the rivalry last year coming to your place. I don't know. I'm not making the case Virginia Tech's going to win the game or it's even going to be down to the wire, but it would not surprise me if they put up some points, and it was harder than some people are thinking. I think Hooker and Herbert,
they're really good.
Are a really good combination with the options stuff, and then Trey Turner, like him too. They can stress you. Although Virginia Tech's defense makes you wonder if Clemson can score 80.
Right. Yeah, with Herbert, I mean, I didn't realize he was averaging over 8 yards a carry. I knew he was having a good year, but I was looking at some of his stuff today, and that's Travis Etienne in his prime. I guess last year, the year before, whatever year it was, when he was over 8 yards a carry. That's rare. That's really hard to do. So he's had a great year. You mentioned Hooker as a dual threat guy who can do a little bit of everything. I think for them, they just can't turn the ball over. If they turn the ball over, and especially early, and let Clemson get a big lead, and then they're trying to pass to come back, I think it's a disaster. But if they can establish something on the ground early with Herbert and Hooker and make Clemson work, who knows? Maybe it'll be closer than a lot of people think.
You had a story on Billy Napier, sort of shifting gears here, recently on his candidacy at South Carolina. Now it seems like it's a very he's very firmly in the mix, at least according to reports. What did you learn in the reporting for that story?
It was a lot of fun. I mean, I didn't know a ton about him going into it. I wasn't at Clemson or covering Clemson when he was there the first time. I guess it was interesting talking to Tommy Bowden about him. I thought it was really interesting just the way he described him and Dabo as being very similar in the fact that he said the two people that he thought he would lose on that staff probably were Dabo and Billy Napier, just because he thought that they had a lot of the same qualities as super bright young coaches who would go out and be great head coaches one day. I don't know that I don't think Billy's going to go have the success that Dabo's had necessarily, but I do think that it's been kind of interesting to follow his path. I mean, you look at what happened going from Clemson to learning from Dabo to learning under Saban to going to Arizona State for a year, and then finally getting his own chance to run a program. And they've been really, really good. I'm really excited to watch the App State game. They're playing App State, I guess, Friday night. I don't know when this will come out, but they're playing App State Friday night. I think that'll be a really fun game to watch. But yeah, it was just interesting kind of looking at his career path. I think one thing that he was always knocked for was I guess, his time at Clemson in 2010 and getting fired from Dabo. And I've seen, South Carolina fans saying, how in the world could you hire a coach who was fired by Clemson and all this kind of stuff. And I think a couple of things that were pointed out from talking to people kind of around him was that in that year, in 2010, for one, he was 31 years old. And I think, thought in some ways that he was maybe a hotshot young coach, or however you want to describe it. But I think that it's important to remember that he was 31 years old as an offensive coordinator at a major Power 5 program. And then also just, C.J. Spiller was gone, Jacoby Ford was gone. There was not a ton of talent necessarily on that team. I think DeAndre Hopkins was young and still trying to find his I guess maybe Clemson didn't know exactly what it had with him as a freshman. So I thought that was interesting. And then just how he's kind of taken some things that Dabo does and Saban does as far as running a program, and kind of taking a lot of that stuff, a lot of the same philosophies as far as way to communicate with players, and taking a little bit from each, and then taking his own system and kind of put his own spin on it. So it was a lot of fun to talk to people about him, learn about him, his path, and kind of how he got to where he is now.
Yeah, I'm not sure that Urban Meyer would have done a heck of a lot in 2010 with that Clemson offense. I mean, like you said, they had lost Spiller and Jacoby. And then, heck, just hypothetically, like, had Dabo not fired Napier, I'm guessing they would have put up some points in 11, because Sammy Watkins is coming in, and Taj Boyd, is a year older, and so yeah. I remember Napier in 16. I think it was the first national championship game against Alabama. He told me. He said, because there were some hard feelings, I think, between them when it first happened. But he said, look, man, I wasn't ready for that. I was 30 years old. I needed to get out and learn and grow. And so he seemed to have a really some healthy wisdom about what had happened. And I don't think there are any hard feelings between those two right now. I don't think there have been recently, at least. So
yeah, I've heard the same. I mean, I've heard that Dabo's even supported him some in other jobs he's gone after, and suggested he'd be a good hire and that kind of stuff. And he's obviously talked highly of him in press conferences. He's been asked about him a few times this year and spoken highly of him in the job he's doing. So yeah, I think if it does end up happening, if he does end up in South Carolina, it could be fun for the rivalry. I think those two would, get along well, and I don't know. I just think it'd be a lot more fun than it is now, at least. I know I wrote a column after last year's game. It's just like there's just nothing. It just feels like a normal spring game almost. That game last year did. I mean, there was no animosity, no hostility, no. South Carolina fans took up about 60% of their own stadium, and Clemson coaches were talking about not even needing to use a silent count and all this kind of stuff. It was just not what I think what we were accustomed to, and just kind of showed how far the rivalry's gone. So it'd be fun maybe to have a little spark added to it.
If anything, you imagine Napier would have more tact, I guess, in sort of dealing with Clemson and what he says publicly. It just seemed like Muschamp just said some really meathead things when he didn't really need to, like sort of poking the bear. Is that the way you see it as well?
Yeah, I'll never forget the first time I ever I was covering an event in Greenville, and it was like some kind of coaches thing, and Dabo and Muschamp were I guess talking for the first time right after Muschamp had been hired, and Muschamp said something like, "Dabo, I think your wife's hitting on me," or something like that.
Yes.
It got some laughs and stuff, and people kind of had fun with it. But at the same time, like you said, maybe don't poke the bear when you're kind of struggling and just taking over a program. Maybe don't start off throwing jabs at the guy that has the best program in the country right now. So even if it wasn't a little fun or whatever, I don't know that Dabo necessarily loved it. So. I don't know.
And then there was another thing that comes to mind is after the 18 game, South Carolina had a player who I guess blew out his knee maybe. And Muschamp is all pissed off after the game. And he says, I think even before he had a chance to even look at the film, he goes, yeah, one of Clemson's guys had an illegally cut block our guy and blew his knee out. And then you go look at the replay. It was Dexter Lawrence who was blocking for Christian Wilkins on a touchdown. It was a perfectly legal block. I mean, not even close to his knees. And it's just, again, you wonder why he said some of the things he said. It just didn't really seem necessary. It seemed like he was too emotional in his handling of it, of a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and I thought it was probably time for a change down there. I know the money situation makes it hard in the pandemic, and they took some criticism for that, but I don't think it's money that's going away from the university or anything like that. I think it's boosters that kind of just said, hey, we've had enough and we're ready to move on. So I thought it was probably time for a change. I mean, you can't give up 50 plus to Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss in his first year when you're a defensive coach in year 5, I think, or whatever it was. You can't give up 50 to a first year Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss and 3 straight games allowing 50 points, and it had just gotten really bad down there. So I thought it was probably time for a change.
I watched that Georgia game last week, and that was one of the most brutal. I don't know if you watched it, but
I did. I think I was driving home from Clemson still.
That was...
No, I didn't see it.
I mean, well, I don't know what the score, 45-14, whatever. I mean, it was more like 65-0. Just line of scrimmage. It was ugly. It was so ugly. So they got quite a rebuild to do down there, whoever it is.
Yeah, it'll be interesting with the transfer portal, how much I think that's what, a lot of places are kind of hoping that are taking over new places are like, we're going to have to hit the portal hard and try to see if we can bring in some talent in different ways and kind of get creative and stuff. So I don't know. I think they're going to have to do that as much as anyone. It'll be interesting to see how many players end up transferring, although there's not a ton of talent down there right now. I know they've had a ton of injuries this year too, and had some guys opt out and stuff. So it's just weird. And it's also crazy how quickly things can go downhill. I mean, you think of not that their program was heading in a great direction last year or anything, but they did beat Georgia last year on the road, and then you go from that to, like you said, just getting absolutely manhandled a year later. It's just kind of interesting how quickly things can turn.
And it really makes a Georgia fan say, how did we lose to that team last year?
With their backup quarterback, or I think Karen Jordan was playing quarterback in the second half.
Like third string. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's weird.
Unbelievable. All right, Matt. Hey, thanks for joining us, and I'm sure you're a busy man. You head up to Blacksburg tomorrow?
I am, yes, sir. Hoping for no snow. I know it's going to be cold, so hoping it won't be too bad. I think the lows are in the high 20s or something. But yeah, it's a fun place. I've only been one other time to see a game, and excited to go back. Even though obviously the fans won't be there, it'll be a little different, but it should be fun.
Stay safe, stay warm.
Sounds good. Thanks, Larry. You too.
Harris Flooring has been a major part of the facilities enhancements over at Clemson, not just with athletics, but also at the university level. And we are thrilled that they are a part of the Dubcast as a sponsor. Since 1947, the Junkins family and Harris Flooring have provided a unique shopping experience through value in their services, developing the right product solutions, and delivering on their promises. To check out some reviews on their work, just go to their Facebook page, Harris Flooring America. Rave reviews, just first class all the way. Phone number 864-642-6183. Another loyal supporter of the Dubcast is Blackacre Law Firm in Greenville, a subsidiary of Parham Smith & Archenhold. Blackacre helps South Carolina residents achieve their dreams of home ownership by providing experienced professional representation for real estate closings. Attention to detail is crucial in real estate law. Blackacre is committed to making sure nothing gets by them preparing residential or commercial closings. Blackacre also offers estate planning services for their clients in the Greenville area. Find out more about Blackacre at 864-326-3507. Happy to have Founders Federal Credit Union on board as a sponsor with us. If you've been to a sporting event in Clemson, you've probably heard about Founders already. They are the the official credit union partner of the Clemson Tigers. In addition to that, all Clemson faculty, staff, and students are eligible for membership as well as IPTAY members. Matt Gross is a proud Clemson alum and the vice president for the Clemson Market for Founders Federal Credit Union. Matt's office is located beside the Walmart Neighborhood Market on Old Greenville Highway in Clemson. For more information, go to foundersfcu.com. My friend, my great friend, Norm Wood. How you doing, man?
You caught me with a piece of pumpkin pie in my mouth. I'm sorry. Finishing off the Thanksgiving stuff. Sorry.
I don't know whether to be honored or offended. I mean, I guess I'm honored.
I take it very seriously. I take your podcast very seriously.
We were just talking before I hit record about the very bizarre sort of situation of when you're at a game, you actually miss, you actually don't catch as much as you would if you're at home in front of the TV. And the context was, I'm not going to Blacksburg this weekend, and you're like, man, congratulations.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's just weird how you're with all the television technology and all the cameras and stuff, you have a better vantage point by not even going to the game.
Yeah, fans definitely have the best seat in the house these days when it comes to actually watching the game. Now, there's no substitute to being there for atmosphere and access in a normal year and all that kind of thing. Of course, this isn't a normal year, so we don't get the access that we normally would. Everything is done, via Zoom post game. So I could do that on my couch too. Yeah, like, the access to replays and, the camera, that fisheye view doesn't quite go as deep as it would, if you're there. I mean, you get to see far more, field of vision and depth being at the game. But, if you want to look right at the line of scrimmage, you want to see all the skill players, you want to see what's going on, in the trenches, like, there's nothing better than just sitting there watching on CBS or ESPN or whatever, that's as good as it gets. So, I'm envious in that way, man. I mean, listen, for basketball these days, there is no question that sitting on the couch at home is better. For where they put us in some of these stadiums and arenas, man, like, there's no doubt that sitting at home would be a far better option as far as being able to keep track of things. You're usually sitting behind the baseline in most of these places, or like Chapel Hill, you're sitting up in the second level of the Dean Dome, which is like sitting on the moon watching a game, So, again, that's all about access, being at a game for those things, but it's going to be, again, same type situation. With the pandemic, there's no real access being at games this year. So I don't know how many basketball games I'm going to go to this year. So we'll see.
I do like, as far as football goes, I like watching the pregame warm-ups just to get a sense of, this is the first string line, these are the starters, this is the backup line, whatever, just getting a sense of what they're going to roll out. And then also during
who's hurt too, you get a feel for that.
That's right.
Who suits up, who doesn't suit up, and that kind of stuff. That is valuable for sure.
But this year, at least the way Clemson is doing it, 2 hours before the game, they release the list of who's unavailable. And so obviously they're not specifying COVID, but you get you get that answer before they even step foot on the field. Who's not going to be there for whether it's injury or whatever. But during the game, I like watching. I do miss, if I'm not at the game, I do. You can learn a lot by looking at who the head coach is yelling at, just the body language type stuff. It allows you to learn a little more. But as far as, which is, again, you miss replay type stuff when you're there. So I don't know, kind of weird.
You miss a lot of pre-snap stuff too. I think being at home, like if you're at the game, you oftentimes with the untrained eye, it's really hard to tell if the offense is looking at a zone or a man defense, just because you can't see movement behind the line of scrimmage sometimes, because they're so focused on what's going on with the offensive line, the defensive line. You can't see how, if they're not pressing, you can't see who's adjusting behind that line. So that defensive line. So a lot of times you kind of, you're beholden to what they're showing you. But then, like you said, I agree, man. The scene on the sideline is a completely hidden world from the TV view. So
substitutions too. You can't really catch that.
Yeah.
On TV, and that's what a lot of the radio crews this year. I'm guessing that Virginia. Well, I don't know. Clemson, at least, their radio crew only traveled to the Notre Dame game. I don't think they're going to Virginia Tech. I could be wrong, but initially the plan was for them not to travel. In the first couple of games, like the Wake Forest game, they did it from the athletic department.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so you have you're sitting there watching on the screen, and the biggest challenge for that in that circumstance is the spotters, because normally spotters are like, okay, here's who's in, and
vital. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So is Virginia Tech's radio crew, have they gone to road games as well?
I don't know if they've been to all of them. I swear, I think I've seen John Laser and Mike Burnip at a few. I don't think they've been to all of them. Again, I have to split time between Virginia and Virginia Tech, so I haven't seen Virginia Tech all season long. So I don't believe they went to Louisville. I still think for some reason, I want to say, and I was in Chapel Hill to see Tech down there, and I want to say they were down there, but maybe I'm wrong, man. I'm not sure.
What's it been like? So neither Virginia nor Virginia Tech have fans at all, or is it?
It's limited. I mean, it's by per order of the governor. There's 1,000 fans permitted, but it just ends up being friends and family type situation. So there really aren't any public ticket sales. And it's almost strange, more. It's as strange to have 1,000 fans in the stands as there are 0. Just because it's like it seems like this exclusive little club that came in to see the game, and when you're supposed to, especially at a place like Lane Stadium where pregame is such a big deal with 66 some thousand fans bouncing. To Enter Sandman and doing all that kind of thing. Well, the 1,000 fans do the same, but you don't even notice it. It's not even. It's not even. You don't even. You just, if you just happen to look down there, you might get. Oh yeah, look, they are jumping. That's weird. So
the press box isn't shaking when 1,000 of them.
No, it's not. It's not shaking like what old Kyle Field there in College Station. Did you ever go there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you go to old Kyle Field? Like before the big whatever it was.
I was there I was there in 2004 and then in 2018. Yep.
So that is a swaying press box, man, when they do that back and forth thing, with the arms locked over each other's shoulders. And I've never been in a press box that moved quite as much as that one did, swaying back and forth.
Who played there that you covered?
Tech did. Tech played there in 2003, I believe, and they won. That was sort of that was an R.C. Slocum A&M team that was, I think, barely over 500. I think it was Slocum. It was near the end of his. I don't think that was Francione, but I think that was a Slocum team. And Tech won. It was not an attractive game. It was like 13-3 or something like that. So yeah.
Well, it was even after the renovation 2 years ago. It was bouncing. You could feel it. It was a little unnerving.
Is that right?
Yeah,
that's what I've heard. But that was 2002 or 2003 when Tech was down there. One of those 2 years.
So what is it? you came to Clemson a couple months ago when Virginia came. What is it like to? I mean, how vast is the difference between 1,000 fans and 19,000 fans, which were present when Virginia came here? What's that?
Quite a bit.
Yeah,
quite a bit. I mean, and I know I know it's noticeable for someone who covers Clemson and for fans that go to Clemson games. I know it's noticeable to go in there clearly and see 60,000 fans missing. I mean, that's no question about it. But for me, coming from I'd only seen at that point of the year, I had only seen I guess Virginia Tech, NC State in Blacksburg. And that was obviously with 1,000 fans. And I think that was the only other game I'd covered to that point, because that was the second game of the year, I think. So to see, compared to what I saw in Blacksburg, just the week before, to see 19,000 or whatever it was in Clemson that weekend, it seemed like night and day, really, as far as the number of fans. It seemed a little more normal, per se, even though there, it was still a pretty barren, Death Valley down there. Comparatively speaking, but yeah, from now with some perspective, looking at it, that was easily the biggest crowd I think I've seen this year. I don't think I've seen any other crowds. Chapel Hill only had 4,000 or 5,000. Trying to think any place else that's really had no. I think that was by far the largest crowd. So yeah, it seemed quite a bit larger than the crowd than I've seen this year, for sure.
All right. Trying to better wrap my arms around Virginia Tech going into this game, and it's crazy just to think back, to 4 years ago and even 3 years ago. Obviously, when the two teams met in the ACC championship, it was Fuente's first year, and there's this feeling of, wow, they were able to push a Clemson team to the edge, a team that went on to win a pretty important trophy by beating a pretty good Alabama team for the national championship. And the feeling is, wow, he's got that program, at a promising sort of trajectory, maybe getting back to their glory days, or at least maybe being a challenger to Clemson's supremacy. And then even in 2017, a year later, when they met in Blacksburg, it still wasn't like, oh God, this Fuente guy, I don't know about him. It still felt like he was building something. And whereas now it's like, man, such a vast difference in the perception of him. And is he going to hang on? It seems like he is, because they can't afford the buyout, so there's really not much of a choice right now, right?
Yeah, I mean, it does seem that way. I tend to lean to the direction that he will be back and all that. Now, I think what will happen is that there will be some discussion about, the classic, hey, you can stay, but your staff's got to change type deal. That wouldn't surprise me. But, the pandemic kind of creates some complications with that. Who's going to be available? Who's going to be, what could Fuente bring in, in terms of, replacing some pieces. And the other issue is, like, as far as much grousing as Tech fans have done about Virginia Tech offensive coordinator Brad Cornelson, they've been pretty productive on that side of the ball at times. Now, they've had some boneheaded play calls, a lot of third down issues. For some reason, they have really, really gotten stuck in the mode of trying to get into two down territory in third and mid-range, and have failed miserably because they keep going to the well with this quarterback power type thing. That has failed miserably in like the last 2 or 3 games, and they get criticized an awful lot, and probably rightfully so, for some clock management issues like they had at the end of the Liberty game. But again, they've been really productive in the run game this year. They're 9th best in the country They've had a really nice offensive line that they've actually developed. They're probably going to have a first-round draft pick at the left tackle in Christian Darrisaw. They've been a nice all-purpose quarterback who's probably regressed a little bit this year, if we're being honest about, as a passer. But they've been so dependent on the run game. Some of that comes back to play calling again and what they've been able to do in the RPO game with him and Khalil Herbert behind him. So they've just been really, really awful defensively, man.
Yeah.
There is no two ways about it. And part of that is, they've got a first-year defensive coordinator in Justin Hamilton. He took over for Bud Foster. It was, sort of got Foster's blessing, got promoted from within the staff. So, they're giving up a ton of plays of 10+ yards, and they've been gouged, against the run by a few teams. North Carolina, in particular, earlier this season. And it's been really ugly at times. Pittsburgh a couple of weeks ago was pretty gruesome too, when they lost 47-14. Louisville obviously broke off. You and I were talking the other day about how do you give up a 90+ yard run right before halftime?
Well, I've never seen that.
It was really bizarre, really strange. It's like they were already off the field, it seemed like, mentally, So, and that goes back to coaching too in some ways. So, you asked whether he's going to survive. Yeah, I mean, he might have to make some changes on his staff. I don't know how you replace a first-year defensive coordinator. And, Brad Cornelson is his boy, man. He's coached with Brad Cornelson, the offensive coordinator, since his days, at Illinois State, which was his first gig as an assistant coach, 15, 16 years ago. But, the financials don't really work out for Virginia Tech either. They're the university, like so many, this in the pandemic, or, it's down $60 million this year. And, this just yesterday, Virginia Tech announced that they're going to be instituting some pay cuts in the athletic department next year. And they've laid off a few people, sort of mid-level people, nothing, not upper management types. So I don't really understand the layoff element of it. It's not really making a huge dent in the financials, but they're going to try to recoup about regain about $15 million for the athletic department. Of course, a lot of people, the fans now, they turn around and say, hey, after December 16th, the 15th, the buyout for Fuente drops to $10 million. If you're going to have $15 million on hand all of a sudden, turn around and buy him out, and the optics of, they don't consider the optics of that, it just looks horrible if you're trying to, save money in a pandemic. And, oh, by the way, we're going to, you take that money and turn around and boot the coach. So I don't know if that's something that can be done in a year like this, unless a private investor comes in and says, strokes a $10 million check to have Fuente walk, which there are rumblings that has happened or will happen. So I don't think we've heard the end of this, obviously. We will see what happens. And since they've got Clemson and Virginia in the next 2 weeks, a lot can change. But it would be stunning, obviously, to see a competitive Virginia Tech team tomorrow against Clemson.
So Fuente, just the big picture, 15-17 versus FBS his last 3 years. Tech's on the verge of their first losing season since 92. What's been the most critical sort of flaw, I guess, that you would identify just sort of under him that has sort of something that you probably wouldn't have anticipated back in 16 when all the vibes seemed to be good?
Yeah, well, first losing regular season since 92. They actually had that losing season 2 years ago.
Oh, that's right. Yep, sorry.
They were 6-7 after the bowl. But, I don't think anybody could have anticipated the type of recruiting issues that they've had, especially in the last 2-3 years now, I guess now, if you're going to count this cycle now, where Virginia's made up a lot of ground and they have largely ignored in-state talent and opted, I'm talking about Virginia Tech, they have largely ignored in-state talent and opted for, well, I don't want to say ignored, they have de-emphasized, we'll put it that way, certainly de-emphasized in-state talent, and opted for going to places like Greensboro and some of the metropolitan areas in North Carolina where they've had some success. They've gotten some guys out of Jersey and some places like that, which have been sort of traditional out-of-state spots for Virginia Tech. And Florida, too. They've gotten a few out of Florida. That's been sort of everybody tries to dip into Florida, obviously, and Virginia Tech's no different. But they've also tried to go this route where they've put a ton of emphasis on what has been seen on social media, especially on Twitter, as this hashtag TX2VT movement. And it's a Texas to Virginia Tech movement.
What?
And so listen, there's a part of it I understand where they have a lot of recruiting personnel and they have a few assistant coaches with Texas ties and Midwest ties. I mean, Fuente himself's an Oklahoma guy. They've like I said, with one of their big recruiting director types is a Texas guy, Bo Davidson, who's sort of a really a big mover and shaker behind the scenes for them on the support staff. And he was one of the ones who really tried to get this movement going. And it seemed like there was some headway being made, at least. They picked up some defensive, some nice defensive recruits last year from Texas that haven't played an awful lot this year, but made down the road clearly. They had a quarterback, the Demetrius Davis kid. They had a receiver that was like a low 4-star guy. What was his name? Anyway, they were making some headway, and then both the receiver and the quarterback end up reneging on their commitments to Virginia Tech and end up going elsewhere. I think the quarterback is going to be at Auburn, and they're left sort of now trying, after that was in the spring. After that, they're scrambling to try to make up some ground with some guys who have already sort of, finalized their top 5 and top 8. And it's been this kind of cycle of a lot of hits and then guys reneging or just total misses on out-of-state talent that they probably, were probably hopeful of in the first place and really didn't, there wasn't much of a backup plan, it seems like. They have, it's just in my area here in Hampton Roads, which has been a hotbed and a really, a talent, it's been just a wealth of talent for Virginia Tech over the years. Granted, this is not the greatest time for this area, but there is talent to be had. It is a huge area, obviously, from Virginia Beach on up to Williamsburg and Norfolk and Chesapeake and places like that. I've talked to high school coaches in this area that don't know anybody on Virginia Tech's staff.
Dude.
Like they don't know them. They don't know them. And I'm not talking about the bottom feeders in some of these high school divisions. I'm talking about some of the mid-level to upper-level teams that don't know anybody on the coaching staff. And Virginia is the same way in a lot of ways. Like they don't, they have spent a little more time in this area, but I spoke with the coach over the summer who said that he hadn't seen a Virginia Tech coach in his hallways since Christmas of 2018.
God.
And this is a guy that's, runs a program that had won, 9 games a couple seasons in a row and had just won 10 games. Now, some of the bigger programs, they are still recruiting and they're getting in there and they're getting some of the top talent. But it sounds like from what I've spoken to with some of those coaches, Virginia Tech is doing what a lot of teams are doing this year, which is really hitting up the summer 7-on-7 circuits, and it's a one-stop shop for recruits, instead of really getting in and knowing some of these coaches and developing the relationships. Maybe it's just a different philosophy and a way about going about things, but it's not working for Virginia Tech. I mean, they've had horrible classes in terms of the recruiting rankings, and what they produced out of those classes in the last couple of years has been minimal, and they've had to go the transfer route to try to get guys in. They've lost a ton of guys. I think 19 guys the last 2 years have transferred out of the program. They've gotten a lot in. Like Khalil Herbert was one of those guys that I mentioned. Raheem Blackshear is another guy that's been helpful. Justice Reed on the defensive end spot. He's started all year, been really productive. Brock Hoffman at center he's had a really nice season too. So they've kind of balanced. I really think the transfer losses and gains have kind of balanced each other out. And maybe Tech has maybe even gained a little bit more than they've lost. But there's a lot of comings and goings in this roster right now. It doesn't particularly bode well for how you can sort of prepare for the future.
Yeah, like how do you ingrain a culture? I mean, I know that's really intertwined in basketball. That's all over, but that's basketball. I mean, it just seems so much harder to try to pull that off in football, where culture seems to be such a big, such an integral part of building a solid program.
Yeah, when the roster's turning so much, it would seem challenging to me too. I mean, if you talk to players and you get some of the, you kind of get some of the behind the scenes look. They swear that there is they love Fuente and they love the staff. Hard to imagine that there would be as much support within the team as there seems to be for this coaching staff. But from what I hear, they're pretty galvanized internally, which did not seem to be the case, in 2018 when some of these transfers, this transfer activity really started to crank up. That was a really bad year as far as the transfer movement was concerned. Tech lost a lot, and there were some rumblings that things weren't so wonderful internally. But players squashed those rumors and discussion, that kind of discussion in a hurry. So, but again, I agree with you, man. It just seems like it'd be difficult to establish a culture with so much turnover.
Chris Cunningham, when did he play there?
Chris Cunningham, I think his last year was 2018 also. He was part of that group that transferred. A lot of those guys, Trevon Hill went to Miami, Chris Cunningham and Eric Kuma, I think, and both ended up at Old Dominion. So, yeah, I think 2018 was his last year. So it was like 16 through 18.
Okay, there was a tweet from him in late November. Y'all keep trying to figure out why players are leaving, why we can't get big-time recruits. Why can't the team get over the hump? One thing between Justin and Frank, meaning Frank Beamer, was their morals, principles, and how they are as people, regardless of this football shit. What did you make of that?
Yeah, well, that's that group I was talking about, where that year in particular, there were a lot of guys. The issue with Trevon Hill was who was a starting defensive end and was off to a nice start. There was a situation, allegedly after the game. The Old Dominion game that was an utter disaster for Virginia Tech. They lost at Old Dominion, where they were 20-some point road favorites. Virginia Tech was, and there was an incident in the locker room after that game that allegedly involved an assistant coach, and it was the last straw for Trevon Hill. He ended up transferring soon after that. It was, indefinitely suspended. But that's what the word was, that it involved an assistant coach. And so, yeah, there are some from that year in particular. And like I said, since then, players, I think, have gone to great pains to try to, sort of squash some of those discussions about, infighting or rifts between players and coaches, and philosophical differences and things like that. But Chris Cunningham, obviously it sounds like one of those guys who was not happy with the way things were either being presented to him, and he was a starter. I mean, that was a guy that was a starter on that team. And a part-time starter, I think, but he started tight end, started quite a bit. So yeah, I think after that, I do remember that there was a lot of Fuente and a lot of the players talked about how there was a lot more listening going on. You know what I mean? After that year, and all those guys sort of when those guys started to leave the program, that there was a lot more listening going on, I guess, in January 2019 and December of 2018. And maybe that's where some of those issues got resolved. But, again, there's something broken. It's obviously clear. It's not, this is, again, it was 10-3 in 2016 and 9-4 in 2017. And now it's just been a slow, like a slow, slide year by year. And, this year they're going to, it's going to be a miracle if they continue the bowl streak, which I guess is a 27. I think it is 27 straight years at this point. But it's almost, if you're just gonna, this is the right year just to rip the Band-Aid on that streak, and because that's really all they've got to hang on to at this point, is that bowl streak. That's the big tradition thing now. There's, from winning ACC championships 10 years ago, and competing for BCS spots, 10, 12, 15 years ago, to now really all they have to hang on to is that bowl streak. Maybe this is the year to kind of rip the Band-Aid on that one and just, start all over from scratch. I mean, there's a lot. They're going to have to do some soul searching on the defensive side in the offseason. Obviously, it's going to have to be some philosophical changes and some tweaks, because that's been difficult transition for Foster, who really liked to, all the man press stuff and and blitzing and things like that, to a lot of blitzing this year too, but mixing more man and zone. The run fits have not worked out for Virginia Tech. The run fits have been, according to players, far more complicated than they were under Foster, where it was a lot of one gap stuff. Now it's a lot of two gap read stuff, and that has not translated well for these defensive players, especially in an offseason where they didn't have a great deal of time and opportunity to learn terminology and work with these coaches. It's been a tough transition. So there's going to have to be some more sort of soul searching and some real evaluation of what fits this defense in particular.
With you being a Georgia grad, I'm sure you are familiar with what happened when Kirby went to Georgia. It was actually what motivated Georgia to go ahead and pull the trigger with Mark Richt was South Carolina was zeroing in on Kirby Smart, and Georgia went and swiped him away. Maybe a similar situation here from the Virginia Tech perspective, in that South Carolina, Shane Beamer seems to be a very serious candidate. Is there significant sentiment up there that, hey, let's rip the Band-Aid off, like you said, and go get Frank's son? He's ready, and let's bring him home.
Yeah, and that's funny you should mention that, because I wrote a little bit about that today, the Shane Beamer situation in South Carolina, and I am sort of restricted still by the constraints of print, where I wanted to get into that Kirby situation in Georgia and Mark Richt a few years ago, and didn't really have the opportunity to in print to make the connections between that and what's going on this year with Virginia Tech fans and Shane Beamer in South Carolina. But yeah, there are some similarities. You're exactly right. Other than the fact that, again, that Georgia took the step, like you said. They went ahead and they did it. They got rid of Richt. They created the opening. Should I say there is no opening in Blacksburg right now? I don't, it's very hard to have these conversations when it's very unclear whether there's going to be an opening or not. And it sort of, seems to me like there's not going to be an opening. So, it's hard to have a conversation about these things where, I know there is a large segment of Virginia Tech fans that wants to see Shane Beamer back in Blacksburg, where he was a player and an assistant coach under his dad. And they would love to have that legacy and tradition back again. And, everybody wants to get back to the 8 straight seasons of 10+ wins that they had in the early 2000s. Under Frank, and sort of, I know that they know that, Shane has some recruiting connections, in Richmond, where he had marginal success at times as an assistant coach at Virginia Tech, granted, but he does have those connections, and I know fans would love to see some of these recruiting avenues reestablished in the state of Virginia. But on top, some of the things to consider here are, okay, if you're Shane Beamer, do you necessarily want your first head coaching job to be in the spot where your dad is a legend and you're going to be following in those footsteps, by the way, in between him and you as a coach who failed, and you're taking over that team?
Well, but isn't that the rule of following a legend? You don't replace the legend; you replace the guy who replaced the legend.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so if you're looking at it that way, then this is the natural progression of things, right? So I still think that if you have the opportunity to go to a school where South Carolina, where he's got, he knows the groundwork there, he understands the nature of trying to succeed in a state with a Goliath up the road in Clemson, and the difficulties there. There are some shiny new facilities there in Columbia that are less than 2 years old.
Yep,
opened up early 2019. There are some attractive elements to that job for sure, especially, again, for a guy that has coached there and, as an assistant and knows the ground a little bit. And, it's not easy. It's not going to be easy to win there in the SEC East, and again, with Clemson up the road. But I see some elements there that would make, if we're just looking at this from Shane's perspective, that would make that more attractive right off the bat as your first head coaching job than Blacksburg would be, and Virginia Tech. But again, the conversation is moot. There is no job opening in Blacksburg, and I don't think there's going to be one. I just don't. I don't feel it. Even though, again, like I said, there is a group of Tech fans that swears that the check has already been written and that there's $10 million on the table from a donor or a group of donors to have Fuente walk. And I don't have any knowledge of that. And there's nothing concrete of that. That's, there's just a rumor out there. So before I see anything more concrete about that or hear anything more concrete about that, I don't believe it. I think Fuente will be back.
Well, the booster thing is an important element that is often missed as people are, speculating on whether a change gets made. I'm not talking about Virginia Tech specifically, but like South Carolina, just like 3 weeks ago, you heard from Columbia. You heard all season, all off season. It was, there's no way that Muschamp gets fired this year. The pandemic has basically given him another year, because they're having all these cuts too, and there's no way the athletic department can afford that. Well, it's not the athletic department. I mean, if you get, and that's exactly what happened. They rounded up enough money from boosters, I guess it was a lot of money. I think one booster plunked down like $7 million, and then they had to get the rest from. They were trying to collect the rest from other boosters, and so that's interesting. If indeed they have if that rumor is true. Is Bud Foster?
I don't know if that's even. That might just be a rumor. Listen, that could be a rumor generated from the guys and from the folks that are hopeful and wishful of Shane being in town. Getting to town. So maybe that's where that rumor got started. But anyway,
another rumor is that I guess you've heard too, is that Bud Foster would possibly join Shane in Columbia. Surely Bud is not going to leave the lake. I mean, he's living the good life right now, right? He appreciates that, right? He's not going to get back in the game, is he?
I did mention that today when I wrote about Shane, and that's what I mentioned, was the fact that it does seem like, for a guy that has tweaked the staff at Virginia Tech this year about texts them every now and again. He's texted Justin Hamilton earlier in the season, basically saying, "Man, I love the view on the lake." While Justin was trying to get the thing started this year in Blacksburg, he has dropped in on Justin a few times and just dropped him a few texts to say, kind of to rub it in his face a little bit about, "Man, this beer's cold out here on Claytor Lake," and just outside of Blacksburg, and he does have a nice spot out there. It's his post-divorce spot. I think he's remarried now, but it's a nice spot out there he's got. That's for sure. And having said that, I am not 100% convinced that he couldn't be coerced back into putting the headset back on again and prowling the sideline, because he was a sideline guy in Blacksburg. He wasn't a coach's booth guy. So prowling the sidelines there in Williams-Brice. I know he loves Shane. He obviously loves Frank. And it will take some convincing, I think. I wouldn't completely write it off. Put it that way. Would not.
So when he retired, when he left, how did he couch it? Was he like, "Yep, I'm done for good, that's it," or was it more? Okay.
Yeah, no, he made it sound as if it was that was it, and he was very emotional about it. It didn't seem like a guy who was saying, that he wasn't doing the old legendary, boxer or MMA guy who says he's retiring and then he's back 2 or 3 months later. It wasn't that kind of deal. It sounded like, just based on his emotions and what he said and some of the indications that he gave sort of, behind the scenes a little bit, was that this was it, that he was content. And, he certainly had made an awful lot of money, especially with the low cost of living in Blacksburg and around that area. And the setup he had there, it seemed like he was very comfortable to be living out the lake and living the life, as we've mentioned, out there. And I know he's done some traveling. He immediately went into a fundraising role with Virginia Tech, which I don't know. I have no idea what he has to do or not do. Maybe he does an awful lot in that role, but it would seem during a pandemic year, his role in that is minimal, and maybe he doesn't. He's not doing as much in that role as he would if we weren't dealing with the pandemic, and maybe he's bored. I mean, who knows? I mean, he has avoided a lot of media contact. When Tech started the season against NC State, his right-hand guy, Charlie Wiles, who was a defensive line coach at Virginia Tech for so long, 24 years, who was let go after last season by Justin Fuente. Timing of it was all very odd, considering I was Foster's last year too. Wiles landed on his feet, and Raleigh, as NC State's defensive line coach, was a really nice landing spot, obviously. And I was trying to put together a story on Charlie, who's a great guy, like Bud. And I called Bud, or I tried to run down Bud, and Bud had no interest in talking about it. He didn't want to talk about the situation. He didn't want to talk about his friend. He didn't, and I wasn't the only reporter. There was at least one other prominent reporter who tried the same route, and Bud didn't want to talk with us about things. There's been a couple other times I've tried to reach out to him this year. We had a good relationship over the course of the 20 years that I covered Virginia Tech with Bud on staff, and he just has not wanted to be part of the scene. So yeah, when he went away, he went away. I mean, there's no question about it. He went. He seemed like he was done.
Celero Communications, formerly known as Tandem Payment, is a full-service integrated electronic payments provider powered by leading-edge technology. Celero provides a wide array of merchant solutions, simplified payments. They make onboarding, taking payments, maintaining risk management and compliance, and getting support quick and easy. At Celero, they're all about helping you achieve sustainable growth as a business. Taking payments isn't the only thing your business needs. With Celero's solutions, you can manage inventory, sell products and services via social media, schedule staff, track sales, get reports, and much, much more. Find out more about Celero at celerocommerce.com. That's CELERO commerce.com. All right, to tomorrow. Tell me if I'm crazy. I don't think Virginia Tech has hung it up yet. I guess you think I'm crazy.
No, go ahead.
Okay,
go ahead.
Here's my support for that. All right, they just got clobbered. Of course, they've had to hear about that and think about that for 2 weeks. Number one. Number two, you got arguably the top football program in college football coming to your house this week, and then you got your rival that beat you last year for the first time in 16 years coming to your house next for the last game. I mean, I think they still have something left. I'm not saying this is going to be. I'm not saying they're going to upset Clemson. I'm not even saying this is going to be a down to the wire game. But I think it might be more interesting than most people think.
And to support your case, there's Tech has had an off week too.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like they've had 2 weeks to stew over what happened. And
I don't know. I'm sorry if you mentioned that. I apologize. That's critical, I think, in all this, because it wasn't just your average run-of-the-mill off week. This was an off week after 9 weeks of pandemic. I mean, like they had nothing, because of the scheduling of things and the way they, had to fit in games and things like that. And they've already, as has been reported over and over, how much Virginia Tech struggled early in the year dealing with the virus and all that. Like, it has been a really, really challenging 9 weeks for them. So I can see your point about these are the two biggest games of the year for them, no question. That, like you said, the number 3 team in the country coming into your place, and then the rival next week. Having snapped a 15-game losing streak last year against Virginia Tech and owning the Commonwealth Cup, which is something that I know means something to these players anyway, so especially since they don't have it now, and it's collected dust in Blacksburg for so long before this year. So. Or last year, should I say. So, yeah, if there was ever a time that they would rise up, and then and also there's the element of, look, they're trying to, as you mentioned earlier, they're trying to avoid a losing season, regular season for the first time in 28 years and continue a bowl streak. So all these elements come into play to make you think that Virginia Tech has something left in the tank for this weekend, but there's another part of me that thinks there's just such a massive gulf, chasm in talent level between these two programs that I don't know if it's surmountable. I think it's kind of an insurmountable thing for Virginia Tech. And, I don't think you can cure all that ails this defense in one off week. And I know it gets, people are healthier now and all that. And that's going to be helpful. But, the times when Virginia Tech has been successful this year, and the players have talked about how they've simplified things, especially on the defensive side. They've went back to a lot of what Dax Hollifield, the linebacker, was saying. what game was it? It might have been that Louisville game where they had success early on. They still gave up 35 points in that game. But he said that we went back to a lot of the things that we did when Bud was here, where it sounded like they were doing a lot of, less complex things in terms of gap reads, against the run. Now, I don't know if maybe they use that off week to try to incorporate some of the old and the new and mix a little bit more of that man and zone look that Hamilton has tried to espouse this year and incorporate more so than Bud Foster did with that mix. But, it does seem like this defense does better when things are simpler. That's the way I look. I know they blitz almost 50% of the time in this, so they're going to try to get some pressure on Trevor Lawrence, and maybe if they can get to him a few times, that can put them in some bad second and third down situations and maybe get them off the field, build some momentum. That'll help, no question, because they can move the ball. There's no question about it. They don't do well, on third down situations, and I know Clemson is really good at getting off the field or on third down. So it's going to be, if they can build some momentum early, get Clemson, keep Clemson from just punching them in the mouth early on and having it get out of hand in the early going, then maybe they can hang around and build some momentum off of that. It's a night game in Blacksburg. It's going to be like 35 degrees. There was a chance of rain. I think that's gone. I don't think it's going to snow or anything, but it will be cold. So, again, you're missing that fan element, so they don't have that advantage. But, I think how the first quarter goes, Virginia Tech has not been a good first quarter team either. Ooh. They haven't scored much in the first quarter. So, if they can keep it close early on and build some momentum, maybe they can hang with them. But I don't see it. I really don't. I just think there's just too much of a talent gap, especially with all the holes Virginia Tech has defensively, and the skill players that Clemson can throw at them.
What's your prediction?
I'm somewhere, I think I said 45-17, I think
mine was 44-17, so.
Is that right? So after all this, you think they're going to destroy him? So it's 22.5-point spread right now, man.
I'm just hedging.
Virginia Tech is a 22.5-point underdog right now. The last time they were a larger underdog at home was 1988 against West Virginia when they were a 28-point underdog. 23-point underdog. Yeah. 23-point underdog in that game, and they ended up losing by like 11 or something like that.
That was the Major Harris team that went to the national championship.
That's right. Don Nealon coached them and all that. Yeah, it was. Yeah, so that's 32 years ago. So it's been a long time since they've been this kind of underdog in Blacksburg, and I don't know if they're going to be able to cover that spread.
I guess what I'm saying is, I really like Hooker. I like the running back. I like Trey Turner. I wouldn't be surprised if Tech put up. If you told me Tech was going to score 28, I would not be shocked. Just because of that.
Yeah, they can score. They can score. I mean, they don't score well in the first quarter, but they've been the second, third quarters. Actually, the middle of games, they've been really good offensively. In particular, I mean, like I said, I think a lot of those play calls I mentioned that have reared their ugly head happened in the fourth quarter when people notice them the most. Obviously, you can't escape that kind of thing, but they do. They do have some nice weapons with Khalil Herbert and Raheem Blackshear. You mentioned Trey Turner. Tavion Robinson is another nice receiver out there, and then Hendon Hooker, who, there are very few RPO quarterbacks that have been as effective at that type of style as he has. He doesn't turn the ball over an awful lot. Again, he lacks something as a passer, but he's not a bad passer. And he can run with the best of them, man. And he's big too. He's a big running target, and that's he is dangerous.
If that guy were at Ohio State or Alabama, oh man,
I agree.
He'd be a star.
Agree. I mean, can you imagine him as I have always thought about the fact, what if he played for some of those Urban Meyer spread option type teams, like especially when he was at Florida and on at Ohio State. Like, can you imagine? I mean, with him and those types of offense,
he's electric. You almost feel sorry for him that he isn't at a place with a really good supporting cast because he's that kind of player.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, Norm, pal, if Clemson has the ball on the 10-yard line, on their own 10-yard line with 8 seconds left, tell Virginia Tech to look out for the handoff.
No kidding. No kidding.
I can't get over that play.
They studied that Louisville tape, man.
I can't get over that play. Oh, my God.
Yep.
All right, man. Have fun tomorrow, and appreciate your time as always.
All right, brother. We'll see you down the road. Hopefully, we'll be able to get to a show here at some point. I don't know.
Oh, gosh.
I'm itching for something, some kind of concert or something we can get to. We'll keep our fingers crossed for that. But good talking to you, man. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks to Norm Wood of the Newport News Daily Press and also Matt Connolly of the State newspaper. 2 newspaper guys going old school here. Appreciate the support of our sponsors and, of course, appreciate all y'all listening. Everybody have a great weekend. Cheers.